Welcome back to Celeb Spot, and thanks for tuning in. Before we dive into today's topic, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Now, let's get into it. Donald Trump just made history with one bold move. He made a request to the Department of Education, and trust me, this was long overdue. The purpose of this massive bureaucracy was to improve education, but after wasting a staggering $3 trillion since its inception, test scores have only gotten worse. Only in government could a failure this big keep getting funded year after year. But before we dive deeper, check out this hilarious clip that perfectly sums up why this department should have been scrapped a long time ago.
Hi, I'm a Scout. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm an interdisciplinary major at UBC. I'm in my last semester. My primary thematic focus is decolonizing academia and public knowledge systems, and my secondary thematic focus is biocultural and linguistic futurity.
For those who don't know what that means, can you give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, basically what I focus on is the promises that the institution has made and also the emergence of indigenous ways of knowing and being across the disciplines, and I feature in a lot of stuff like language revitalization, or the emergent vitality of languages rather, and just kind of a bunch of stuff. I've taken courses in over 20 departments, so
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
This is what our tax dollars are funding. Students complaining about their worthless degrees in things like underwater basket weaving or whatever other pointless major they're wasting their time on. Let's be honest, their parents probably aren't the ones paying for this mess. And that's the real issue with government-subsidized college. When the federal government started throwing money at higher education, universities saw dollar signs and came up with every absurd, fake major just to keep the cash flowing. They inflated demand by pushing worthless degrees that lead to no real jobs. But once they ran out of made-up majors, they just raised tuition instead. Now, here's where I break from traditional conservatives. I do think the government should help fund education, but only for STEM majors. If you want taxpayer money, you better be studying something that actually shapes the future: engineering, medicine, real science. No more funding for gender studies or artisanal yogurt appreciation. Let's be honest, funding STEM education will be a game changer. We're talking top-tier jobs, cutting-edge tech, stronger national security, and major medical breakthroughs. That's how you actually invest in the future, not by wasting money on degrees that leave students buried in debt and working at coffee shops. Now, let's get into Trump's bold move, slashing the Department of Education with one executive order. Alright, we all know what's coming next. Some activist judge, probably an Obama holdover, is going to try to block this faster than you can say constitutional overreach. I even saw a meme joking that a federal judge would make Trump send astronauts back to space if they could. That's how out of control these judges have become. But here's the truth. Trump absolutely has the authority to dismantle this bloated bureaucracy and shift any critical functions to other departments. Let's be clear, the Department of Education is a scam. Trump dropped some hard truths. After 45 years and trillions of dollars wasted, we spend more per student than any other country, yet our kids are ranked dead last in math and science.
After 45 years, the United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close, but yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success. It's an amazing stat. Those are two stats you don't want. The most money spent per pupil, and you're at the bottom of the list. And that's where we are, like it or not, and we've been there for a long time. 70% of 8th graders are not proficient in either reading or in math. 70%. 40% of 4th graders lack even basic reading skills, can't read. Students in our public elementary and middle schools score worse in reading today than when the department opened, by a lot. In Baltimore, 40% of the high schools have 0 students who can do basic mathematics.
That's all you need to know. This department is a complete failure and deserves to be shut down. Now, get ready, because the Democrats are about to hit the panic button with fake tears and emotional manipulation. They'll cry, "What about free lunches? ESL programs? Special needs funding?" Please, those are just excuses to keep this money pit alive. Each of those programs should be handled locally, where they actually work better, without the federal bloat. Trump didn't just dismantle the Department of Education. He preemptively shut down the left's meltdown by making his plan crystal clear. The good stays, the garbage goes. Think about it. $260 billion poured into this bloated agency every single year, and our kids still can't read or do basic math.
But the department's useful functions, and such as, and they're in charge of them, Pell Grants, Title I funding, resources for children with disabilities and special needs will be preserved, fully preserved. They're all going to be. So if you look at the Pell Grants, supposed to be a very good program, Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs, they're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of them.
The Democrats defending this disaster don't even realize they've been brainwashed into idolizing bureaucracy. They act like these agencies should exist no matter what, even when they fail at their only job. Take a look at this chart from 2018. Since 1970, reading, math, and science schools have either stagnated or dropped, while costs and bureaucrats have exploded. Now, imagine if we took all that wasted money and actually paid teachers what they are worth, instead of lining the pockets of union bosses who protect failing educators. We could build a merit-based system that rewards great teachers and removes the dead weight. That would attract real talent instead of pushing away smart, capable people who don't want to live paycheck to paycheck. Now, listen to Steve Miller as he breaks down the scam that is the Department of Education.
Well, as we know, the Department of Education here in Washington, D.C. is overwhelmingly staffed by radical left Marxist bureaucrats who are in every way hostile to Western civilization, hostile to American interests, and hostile to our founding documents and culture. And so they are using their position and influence inside the Department of Education to try to force agendas like radical gender ideology, like critical race theory, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all kinds of anti-America curricula and policies on the American people, on our students, on our children. So it's taking away from parents the ability to control and direct the education of their own kids, of their own families. So what we're going to do under President Trump's leadership and direction is to return that authority to the greatest extent possible to the local level where parents can control outcomes, while at the same time making sure that no federal funds are used to support racism, to support gender ideology, or support other ideas and principles that are offensive to the American taxpayer.
Democrats love to claim, oh, the feds don't control school curriculum. Technically, that's true, but here's what they don't tell you. This is how the scam really works. The Department of Education funnels taxpayer money to shady organizations, which then pay experts to push their radical agenda through so-called studies. Suddenly, these groups discover that classrooms need rainbow flags, that white kids should feel guilty just for existing, and that 6-year-olds must be lectured about systemic oppression instead of learning to read. These activist groups then hold conferences where teachers' unions force their nonsense into local schools. And here's the kicker. If a district refuses to comply, the Department of Education cuts their funding. So no, the feds don't technically control curriculum. They just blackmail schools into doing whatever the woke mob demands. This is exactly why the department had to go, and why the Democrat defense of it makes no sense. Even MSNBC couldn't ignore the disaster, grilling a former education secretary about why test scores keep plummeting after decades of failure.
You know, Secretary King, what is also true is that students' test scores hit an all-time low last year. Why do you think that is, and what do you think should be done to improve that?
Look, we are still struggling with the impact of COVID. So many students' lives were disrupted in dramatic ways by the COVID crisis. Our performance as a country is below where it was before COVID. We ought to be having a conversation about what we do about that. We know, for example, that intensive tutoring can help students make very rapid progress. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the dismantling of the department. We haven't heard any ideas from the Trump administration about how we actually improve education in this country. That's the conversation we desperately need to have.
Trump doesn't need to micromanage classrooms. That's the whole point. He gets what these bureaucrats never will. Local schools know their students better than 50,000 paper pushers in Washington ever could. Let's be real. Our education system was already failing before COVID exposed just how deeply broken it truly is. Now, Biden's former education secretary has the audacity to claim she never pushed to keep schools closed. Don't just take my word for it. Let's watch the video that exposes her lies.
COVID was a terrible time for us, and as you know, because I was on your show a lot and other shows, I wanted schools to be reopened as early as April of 2020. The issue was the fear, and the issue was the safety issues. But COVID has really hurt in so many ways. But this has been a Republican talking point for a long time.
Unbelievable. Democrats didn't just destroy a generation of kids' education. They wasted $3 trillion doing it. This is their playbook across every agency. Steal taxpayer money, funnel it to their NGO pals and union cronies, then watch those groups send it back into Democrat campaigns. This is why they are fighting tooth and nail to save this corrupt system. It's not about education. It's about power and profit. This fight was never about education. It was about corruption. Democrats are terrified of losing their biggest slush fund and being exposed for rubbing taxpayers blind. But here's what really scares them. Trump proves that the federal government can be slashed in half and still function better. Now, every politician from the last 40 years will have to answer for why they blew trillions on failure after failure.
And if people are in high risk, they shouldn't be in school. They should be doing things remotely. Just because Donald Trump wants to take a risk with people who go to bars or beaches, those of us who have spent our life teaching kids are not going to take a risk with kids or with our members' lives.
Remote and hybrid are really the only two ways you can reopen schools safely.
You got to delay school opening because if you don't have the mask, how are you going to be able to do this? There's a huge difference between working in Walmart and working in a school.
This is why the establishment hates Trump. He's not just changing policies, he's ending their grift. Today's victory? Another promise made, another promise kept. A salute to President Trump. This is how you drain the swamp. The education scam they never wanted you to see has finally been exposed. This was never about helping students. It was about building a political empire with your money. For years, the Department of Education operated like a woke money printing machine, funneling billions to radical activists who turned classrooms into indoctrination centers, all while test scores plummeted. Now, the whole scheme is falling apart, and watching Washington panic is absolutely delicious. Follow the dirty money trail they've desperately tried to hide. Those trillions in wasted taxpayer dollars weren't accidents. This was the whole point. Every cent traveled the same crooked path, from your wallet to bureaucrats to teachers' unions and straight into Democrat campaign coffers. They created the perfect legalized money laundering operation disguised as education. Universities inflated tuition to match government loans. Textbook companies got rich pushing political propaganda. And diversity consultants made millions teaching white guilt and pseudoscience. The ultimate con? Making parents pay for their own children's brainwashing. The grand finale of this racket was creating two separate education systems. Private schools for their kids, failing factory for yours, all while pushing the college for everyone lie that left a generation drowning in debt with useless degrees, qualifying them only to protest a system they can't succeed in. But Trump just dropped a truth bomb that changes everything. This isn't just about cutting budgets, it's about exposing the entire corrupt game. By dismantling this bureaucratic monster, Trump is starving the activist groups that thrive on federal dollars, forcing schools to actually compete for students, and returning power to parents. This proves that government programs exist to grow government, not to solve problems. The establishment's furious backlash tells you everything. They are not defending education. They are defending their six-figure salaries funded by your struggle. This fight goes way beyond one department. It's about breaking the vicious cycle where failure gets rewarded with more funding, which leads to more failure, with bureaucrats getting richer every step of the way. The swamp creatures are fighting like rabid animals because they know if Trump wins this, their entire gravy train is next. Sound off in the comments. What do you think about axing this failed department? Smash that like button if you're tired of the corruption, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. We're crushing toward 10K subs. See you in the next one. Let's keep winning.